What if we've been looking at the idea of weakness the wrong way all along? Most of us grow up thinking that weaknesses are the parts of ourselves that need to be hidden, fixed, or even eliminated. We're told to work on our weaknesses as if they are dangerous flaws. But pause for a moment and ask yourself, who decided that certain traits were weak, and why? The truth is, the concept of a weakness is not objective, it's social. What's seen as a flaw in one culture might be praised in another. A quiet child might be told they lack confidence in one country, but seen as thoughtful and wise in another. A girl who cries easily might be called too sensitive in school, while in her home she's known for her empathy and deep heart. Weakness, in this sense, is not a fact. It's a judgment and often a reflection of society's limited view of human diversity. Many of our so-called weaknesses are simply ways in which we differ from the norm. And the norm is often built on values that prioritize loudness over quiet, speed over reflection, charisma over authenticity. But that doesn't mean those other traits are wrong. It just means they haven't been seen in the right light. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me? We can begin to ask, how can I use this part of me differently? What if your quietness is actually your power? What if your sensitivity is your ability to feel deeply and help others feel seen? What if your cautiousness is not fear, but a gift of planning and detail? In other words, maybe weakness is not weakness. Maybe it's just a trait in the wrong environment, or a strength that hasn't been trained yet. When we start to see our differences not as defects, but as design, something shifts inside us. We stop fighting ourselves and begin to understand ourselves. That's when true growth begins, not from becoming someone else, but from honoring who we already are. 1. First impressions aren't facts. Why perception isn't truth. We live in a world that is fast to judge and slow to understand. Most people don't take the time to look beneath the surface. We size others up within seconds. How they speak, how they dress, how they interact in a room. But those impressions are rarely the full truth, and often, they're completely wrong. Think of someone you've misjudged before. Maybe they seemed cold, but were actually just shy. Or maybe they seemed arrogant, but were really just nervous. Human beings are far more complex than they appear, and yet we often reduce them to one trait or label. For instance, someone who doesn't talk much might be seen as rude or stuck up. But maybe they're deep thinkers, great listeners, or people who need time to feel safe. A woman who speaks directly may be called intimidating or too much. But maybe she's just honest, clear, and not afraid to show up as herself. The problem isn't the trait, it's how we interpret it through the lens of our own biases and expectations. We all carry internal stories about what's acceptable or likable, and when someone deviates from that script, we assume the worst, but that assumption says more about us than about them. Even worse, we sometimes project those judgments onto ourselves. We begin to believe that if others think we're too quiet, too sensitive, too emotional, then something must be wrong with us. And so we shrink. We try to change. But the truth is, we were never broken. It takes maturity and compassion to see that most judgments are just misunderstandings. When we stop rushing to label people, we create space for curiosity and connection. Instead of asking, what's wrong with them, we can begin to ask, what's their story? 2. Traits, not flaws. The power of reframing weakness. Let's take a closer look at a few traits that are commonly labeled as flaws. You might recognize some of these in yourself or in people around you. And yet, once you change the lens through which you see them, you begin to realize they were never flaws to begin with. They were simply misunderstood forms of strength, waiting to be seen differently. Take shyness, for example. Society often mistakes shyness for weakness, awkwardness, or social incompetence. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Shy people are often deep thinkers. They don't rush to fill silence with empty words. They observe, reflect, and tend to only speak when something feels worth saying. This makes their words intentional and often profoundly impactful. In a culture obsessed with being loud and fast, a quiet presence can be grounding. Shy individuals may be the ones who notice what others overlook, the flicker of sadness in someone's eyes, The subtle tension in a room, the small kindnesses that go unseen. Their strength is not in dominating space, but in holding space. Now consider the opposite. People who talk a lot. In a society that values quiet competence and brevity, talkative individuals are often labeled as too much. They may be told to tone it down, to be more reserved. But beneath that chatter is often a vibrant inner world trying to reach out and connect. People who talk a lot are often natural communicators. They think aloud. They process their emotions through stories, through shared experiences, through connection. Their words are bridges. Their presence brings life, movement, and color into otherwise dull environments. In the right roles like teaching, public speaking, counseling, or creative leadership, they thrive. They remind us that words can build, comfort, inspire. They don't just fill the silence, they make it meaningful. And then there are the overly emotional, the ones who cry too easily, feel too deeply, love too fiercely. These individuals are often told to toughen up, to stop being so sensitive. But sensitivity isn't fragility, it's presence. It's the ability to feel what others may miss. Highly emotional people are often natural empaths. They sense subtle shifts in tone, mood, and energy. They carry not just their own emotions, but the emotions of others. This makes them excellent caregivers, writers, artists, therapists. Their emotions, when nurtured and not ashamed, become portals to deeper understanding, to art, to healing. Their tears are not signs of weakness. They are proof that they are alive, awake, and capable of love. Now let's talk about the overly cautious, those who take too long to decide, who hesitate before every move, who triple-check every detail. Society may call them slow, indecisive, or overly anxious, but look again. These people are often highly responsible, deeply thoughtful, and deeply aware of the weight of their decisions. They plan not out of fear, but out of care. They anticipate consequences. They see the chain reactions before they begin. In times of crisis, they are steady. While others react, they assess. While others dive headfirst, they read the current. Their caution is not cowardice, it is wisdom with patience. And in roles that require foresight, safety, and detail, they are invaluable. Even the trait of being easily hurt, which many people try to hide or bury, holds a kind of quiet power. Yes, it means you can be wounded more easily, but it also means your heart is open. You're still reachable. In a world where numbness is often mistaken for strength, to feel deeply is an act of courage. To be hurt means you care. It means you're alive, sensitive, and emotionally awake. When balanced with self-awareness, this openness creates the kind of people who make others feel safe. People who notice, people who care, people who don't laugh at vulnerability but honor it. This kind of emotional responsiveness can be a superpower when channeled wisely. All of these examples point to one larger truth. No trait is inherently bad. There is no absolute weakness. What matters is context, how and where a trait is used, and whether it's understood or shamed. A trait misapplied becomes a burden, but a trait embraced, developed, and aligned with purpose becomes a strength. So instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" ask, "What is this part of me trying to do?" Instead of, "How do I fix this?" ask, "How can I work with this?" Healing isn't about erasing traits. It's about translating them. It's about turning down the volume of shame and turning up the volume of compassion. When we see ourselves clearly, when we stop calling our gifts flaws, we begin to make peace with who we are. We grow not by becoming someone else, but by becoming more of who we've always been. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not broken. You are simply a story in progress, learning how to use every page of yourself wisely. 3. Everyone has a story. Don't be so quick to label others. Every flaw we see in someone might be a defense, a survival mechanism, or simply a misunderstood personality trait. Before we judge someone for being too quiet, too loud, too emotional, or too distant, we should pause and remember we're only seeing one page of their story. Some people become guarded because of past trauma. Maybe they were once mocked for speaking up, so now they stay silent. Others may seem overly emotional, because they were never allowed to fully express themselves growing up. What looks like a weakness now may have once been a shield, a way to survive pain, rejection, or neglect. Not everyone had the same environment, upbringing, or support system. Some people didn't grow up in safe homes. Others were constantly compared, belittled, or misunderstood. So when you see someone struggling or behaving differently, remember, they might just be carrying invisible wounds. Moreover, personality is not one size fits all. Some people are naturally more introverted, some are more expressive, others are logical, some are emotional. We were never meant to all be the same. Forcing people to conform to a narrow ideal only creates shame, not growth. The danger of labeling someone based on one trait is that we limit their potential. We box them in. And once they're in that box, they begin to act from that place, not from who they really are, but from who we've told them they are. This is how people become disconnected from themselves. Compassion begins when we replace judgment with curiosity. Instead of saying, "They're so annoying," try asking, "What might they have gone through to become this way?" Instead of saying, "They're too emotional," consider, "How might the world look through their eyes?" None of us are born with a manual. We're all just doing the best we can with the tools we have. When we understand that, we become more patient with others and with ourselves. We stop labeling and start listening. That's when real human connection begins. 4. Change the lens, change the system. Our personal perceptions shape not only our relationships, but also the entire systems we live in: families, schools, workplaces. When enough people change how they see weakness, the environment around us starts to change too. In families, for example, a child who talks too much is often silenced or scolded. But what if that child is actually gifted in communication? What if they just need guidance, not discipline? Or a child who cries easily, maybe they're not weak, but just deeply attuned to their emotions. Instead of suppressing their feelings, what if we taught them how to express and channel them? In schools, the loud, outgoing kids often get more praise. They speak up in class, lead group projects, and draw attention. But the quieter ones, the observers, the thinkers, the artists can get lost. We need to create learning spaces where all kinds of intelligence are recognized. Creativity, empathy, reflection, these are powerful too, even if they don't always show up in grades or presentations. In the workplace, those who socialize less or speak less in meetings may be overlooked. But maybe they're the ones who work the hardest behind the scenes, solve problems deeply, or bring stability during crises. Instead of forcing everyone into one mold of team player, we should expand what that even means. Diversity of personality leads to better collaboration, not worse. When society stops rewarding only one kind of personality, we start building environments that are healthier for everyone. We stop asking, "How do we fix this person?" and start asking, "How do we support their growth in a way that respects who they are?" Changing how we see weakness isn't just about being nice. It's about justice. It's about recognizing that the systems we live in were built with biases, and that by shifting our perspective, we can rebuild something more human, more compassionate, more real. 5. Turning weakness into personal power. The transformation begins not with self-improvement, but with self-inquiry. We're taught to hide our flaws, to silence them, to pretend they don't exist, or to smother them in perfectionism. But what if the journey isn't about fixing yourself? What if the real task is learning to see clearly? The first step is reflection. And I don't mean just thinking about what's wrong with you. I mean sitting with yourself, gently, curiously, naming what you've always believed to be your weak points. Write them down. Don't rush. Maybe you cry too easily. Maybe you always overthink things until you're paralyzed by possibilities. Maybe you avoid conflict, say yes when you want to say no, and walk away when you should speak up. Now pause. Ask yourself, in what environments might these traits actually be helpful? What kind of person and what kind of situation could benefit from these exact sensitivities? Let's take crying easily. It's often dismissed as being too sensitive or emotionally unstable. But have you ever noticed that the people who cry easily also tend to be the ones who feel most deeply? They're attuned to the unspoken emotions in the room. They can sense tension, grief, love sometimes before anyone even says a word. In a world that numbs, denies, or buries emotion, these people remain open-hearted, and that is no small thing. That kind of openness can fuel profound art, nurturing friendships, or empathetic therapy. They're the ones who make others feel seen, simply because they see so much themselves. Now think about overthinking. The world tells overthinkers to just let it go, to stop being anxious, to live in the moment. But what if your mind is wired to see patterns others miss? What if your habit of mentally rehearsing outcomes is actually a form of preparation? Strategic thinkers, planners, architects, researchers, many of them are chronic overthinkers. They're good at anticipating risks. They plan for the unseen. They ask questions no one else dares to ask. Of course, overthinking can be paralyzing when it's unmanaged, but in the right setting, it becomes foresight, depth, precision. It's not a weakness. It's a gift that just needs direction. And those who avoid conflict, society often labels them as weak-willed or passive, but look deeper. These are often the peacemakers, the listeners, the ones who instinctively choose harmony over control, empathy over domination. In environments filled with tension, they're the ones who create calm. Their discomfort with conflict may come from a deep value for emotional safety, for themselves and for others. That's not cowardice. That's compassionate action. And with a little assertiveness training, these same people can become exceptional diplomats, mediators, relationship builders. So here's the truth. Every so-called flaw holds an equal and opposite form of power. It's just waiting to be nurtured. That leads to the second step, development. Once you've reframed your traits, don't stop there. Develop them. Use your weakness as a seed and water it. You don't need to change it. You need to channel it. Let's say you're introverted and hate public speaking. Fine. Don't force yourself to be a stage performer. Instead, build strength where you're already rooted. Maybe you write. Maybe you design. Maybe you connect deeply one-on-one. Focus your energy there. When you work with your nature, not against it, you stop wasting energy trying to be someone else. If you're deeply emotional, don't try to become numb. Instead, learn about emotional intelligence. Study the language of feelings. Explore art, music, therapy, or mindfulness. Start to notice how your emotions rise and fall like waves, and build tools to surf them. You don't need to get rid of your feelings. You need to learn how to ride them skillfully. Whatever your so-called flaw is, stop trying to fix it in someone else's image. Start sculpting it into something you can use. That's real self-growth, not erasing who you are, but deepening who you are. And then comes the final, most transformative step, compassion. This is where most people skip ahead. They get frustrated. I've already done so much work on myself. Why am I still like this? But here's the secret. Healing isn't about perfection. It's about acceptance. Real compassion says, I see this part of me. I understand why it exists, and I choose to love it anyway. Let that sink in. You don't need to prove your worth by fixing everything you've ever been ashamed of. You don't need to banish your mesalliances, your wounds, your awkwardness. What you need is gentleness, curiosity, a willingness to look your imperfections in the eye and say, you belong too. Because confidence isn't the absence of insecurity. It's the ability to walk forward with your insecurities still in your pocket and not let them define your steps. Self-awareness doesn't mean constant self-criticism. It means noticing your patterns and having the courage to choose differently when it matters. It means recognizing when your sensitivity needs protection or when your overthinking needs a pause. It means giving yourself the grace to be both a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time. So if you're wondering how to turn your flaw into a strength, start here. Reframe it. Develop it. Soften toward it. Stop asking, what is wrong with me? Start asking, how can I better care for the parts of me that feel most unlovable? Because once you do that, once you stop fighting yourself, you become someone whole. And in that wholeness, your weaknesses stop being heavy. They become bridges to understand, to connect, to self-respect. and eventually you look back and realize it wasn't a flaw at all. It was just a part of your power waiting for you to remember who you are. 6. Final thoughts. Embrace yourself, inspire others. The world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs real people who are honest, who've struggled, who felt lost and still choose to grow. When you stop apologizing for your weaknesses and start honoring them, you give others permission to do the same. You become a light for those who've been dimmed. You show them that they're not alone, that they're not broken, that their story matters. Your quietness might help someone else feel safe to speak. Your vulnerability might help someone else feel less ashamed of their tears. Your imperfection might remind someone that they don't need to perform to be loved. This is what healing looks like. Not fixing everything, but finding beauty in the parts of yourself that once made you feel small. So today, take a moment and look at yourself with softer eyes. Recognize the strength in your softness, the power in your sensitivity, the wisdom in your wounds. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to become more of who you truly are. That's how we heal. That's how we lead. That's how we begin to create a world where everyone's truth is welcomed, not hidden. And it all begins by accepting the part of you you once called a weakness. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.